In this lesson, we're going to be looking at funeral speeches. You have the opportunity to speak at a funeral. I've had my share of funerals. In fact, over the last 2 years, I've had the honour, the privilege of officiating the service, the memorial service for my mother, my father, my birth mother in England, and my uncle. And so the last couple of years, last 18 months to 2 years, have been quite emotional for me, dealing with quite a bit of grief, personal grief, and just sort of working through that, and actually ended up having some time with a counsellor just to give me some more perspective or another perspective, and just to help me to work through, work through the grief and work through the challenge that I've faced. But, conducting those and officiating those services and having that opportunity was a privilege, but it certainly was a challenge, being able to bring that together, and had the help of other people, of course, but carrying that and the weight of that and being able to speak and share on this particular platform. I learnt a lot about myself. I learnt a lot about funerals. And I learnt a lot about this particular occasion, this particular platform, speaking at a funeral service or a memorial service. And so out of some experience and some knowledge, I wanted to just share a few thoughts with you, because no doubt, if you're a public speaker, the opportunity to speak at a funeral, it does come around and to many people, and those that don't consider themselves public speakers actually have the opportunity too. And so what to say and how to say it, and just some things to consider, some points to consider, is what we're going to be looking at in this particular lesson today. You're probably following in the notes, but firstly I just want to talk about the gift. I think that speaking at a funeral service, a memorial service, is a gift. It's the opportunity, it's a gift. I like what Margaret Peel Everett says, and I'll read it to you, and I quote. She says, "Funerals are not for the deceased, who have already been released from the limitations of this world." You know, the truth is that the opportunity to speak is an opportunity to speak to the living. Not to the deceased, but to speak to the living. And I think the most important thing that we need to consider is that we are there to help the living. We're there to speak words of life, words of comfort, that are going to help those of us who are left behind. Those of us who are left and mourning and grieving, and trying to come to terms with our loss. And so this opportunity, it is a gift. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a privilege. You know, a lot of people love to speak at a wedding, and they're exciting and they're fun. And the funeral service, the memorial service, is a different platform. But that's not to say that we cannot say something and share something that is equally important and engaging, that helps people in the journey of their grief. And so to have the opportunity to officiate at a service in memory of someone, but to speak to those who are there, creating a positive memory for people to connect with. The question I ask myself when I have the opportunity to speak is, am I giving the families and the relatives that are there, am I giving them a gift? Am I giving them the gift of my time, the gift of my words, the gift of my love, the gift of my concern and my empathy? Or am I just seeing it as an opportunity to speak? I think we ought to see it as a gift. Secondly, I think it's important for us to understand that it's okay to cry. It's okay to be emotional. I, every now and then, will watch a YouTube clip of Elton John singing at Princess Diana's funeral. You've got, I don't know, 1 billion people watching. You've got just a worldwide audience. And there's Elton sitting at the piano singing that beautiful song. And I watched an interview with him after that, and the interviewer said to him, how did you keep it together? You know, it wasn't as if Princess Diana was a stranger for Elton. They apparently had a very close relationship and considered each other to be dear friends. But he said, and I'll never forget, he said, I'm a professional. He said, I had a job to do, and I had to do that. He said, I just blocked out the fact that 1 billion people were watching, and I just focused on what I had to do, what I had to deliver. And I think it's good advice. Now, it's not to say that you can't cry. I think, though, you'd appreciate that, you know, he's playing the piano and he's singing. It's probably not going to go down too well if he's having to stop and cry and wipe his eyes. And, you know, the fact is that maybe you and I aren't playing the piano, but we're speaking and we're standing on that stage. And but I think it's important to give ourselves the freedom to be able to express emotion. And if that means crying, then we ought to give ourselves that opportunity to cry. The reality is, this is a very emotive platform. This is a time of great emotion, not just for you, but for everybody that's there. Yeah, some people consider crying is a taboo. You know, you shouldn't cry. You've got to hold it together and keep yourself together. And I understand that. I understand that we do have to take charge of our emotions. But that's not to say that we can't display our emotion. And if need be, we cry, we pause, we got a handkerchief, and we wipe our tears and we pull ourselves together and we continue. You know, it's tough to control your emotions sometimes. Not just crying, but even laughing, you know. Whatever the emotion might be. But the truth is, people are grieving. And we all grieve differently and we express our emotion differently. I just think we can't allow our emotion to overwhelm us, but at the same time, we need to give ourselves some freedom to be able to be and share our emotion. The third thing I want to say about speaking at a funeral is that it's important for us to understand that it's not about me. It's not about me. Sure, it was my mum. It was my dad. It was my uncle. It was my birth mother. You know, these are important, key people in my life. But even in that situation, it's not about me. It's not a platform for me to spotlight myself. The best speakers are able to focus on others. They're aware of themselves, but they focus on others. Now, at my uncle's funeral, my cousin, my uncle's son, they had been estranged from each other. I don't think they'd spoken for something like 10 years. And so it was quite emotionally charged service. Excuse me. And I'd planned a 30-minute service. In fact, I think it was at a memorial place, and you had you bought a 45-minute block of time. And then, you know, you're in, you're out, and the next service takes place. And so they're very time conscious. Well, I did the introductory remark, and then introduced my cousin, Graham, and he got up. Well, 5 minutes went by, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. 35 minutes went by, and Graham was still speaking. Not appropriate, but what was even more inappropriate was the fact that he was just focusing on himself. And I remember speaking to him after. I said, wow, Graham, that was an interesting speech. He said, yep, I had to get some things off my chest, he said. I had to say it as it was. I had to set the record straight. And I said to him, well, Graham, you know, it really isn't all about you. And we had a bit of a heated discussion about it. But the point is, you know, we can get carried away with ourselves and the relationship that we had and how much we're going to miss the person. And, you know, we tell stories that other people don't know about, or, you know, it's just you and the deceased. And I just think we have to understand that it's not about me. It's not about you. It is about the people that are still there, living, the families. Of course, it's about the deceased, but we can't afford to focus on ourselves too much. The fourth thought is, with regard to speaking at a funeral, is to avoid the question why. I think the question why, or taking the opportunity to rally people around a cause. Let's say the person died of cancer, and so you're going to speak about, opportunities that people can engage to raise money for cancer research, etc., etc. I think you've just got to keep in mind that those sort of questions and the discussion that those questions gives people the opportunity to engage in is probably better to do that on another occasion. Maybe a private conversation, maybe after, maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, those sort of discussions. But I think speeches that raise the question why, I think we should avoid. And I say that because I think you sometimes can't answer the why. Why did my birth mother die at such a young age? Why did my uncle? Why did my, some things are unexplained. And so when you pose those questions, and of course you can say, well, Jeremy, everyone's going to be thinking that, so maybe we should address it. And no doubt people will be asking that. But, I think we stick to things that we can speak about without heightening the emotion, without, there's going to be bound to be people that say, yeah, that's right, why did it happen? And you can take people down a road that's best not to go on the particular occasion. So just be careful about, that question why and raising causes. Fifth thing I want to say is that, you've got the opportunity to speak. It's a wonderful opportunity for healing. Now, I'm not about to suggest that you pray for the person in the coffin, okay? Let's have a resurrection. Maybe you've got the faith for that. I never have, and I don't know if I will. But it is an opportunity to deliver a well-written and well-thought-through speech with interesting stories and delivered with compassion and honesty. And that in itself can be a healing experience for people. The truth is, when you're at a funeral, people are questioning their own morality. People are, carrying sickness, and there's bound to be people in there that maybe don't have long to live, who've been given a negative or a positive doctor's report, and but your words, the words that you choose to use. We've talked about this, haven't we? That we're wordsmiths. That's what public speakers are. And, choosing the right words, choosing words of comfort, choosing words that speak of peace. In a Christian context, being able to speak of the Holy Spirit, the one who can draw alongside and comfort and bring healing to people. There'll be people in that meeting, that service that have got memories, beautiful memories, and sometimes they can get lost in the occasion and get lost in the loss, And so to be able to speak words that bring people to a place of peace and rest and comfort and maybe even healing for themselves. Maybe people have experienced situations with the deceased that were unresolved, and maybe the words that you specifically choose to use and speak can bring people to a place where they're open to restoration, open to healing. The sixth thing I think we should consider is to give people the opportunity to publicly say goodbye. For some people, the funeral service is a point of closure. Not for everybody, but for some people, they will attend that service as a last, the last post, if you like. We're going to attend that, and it'll end that chapter. They'll bring some closure to it. I always make the point of giving people the opportunity to say goodbye. In fact, I will say, I did it at my uncle and my family's funerals. I said, I'm just going to take a moment now to say goodbye. And you give people that opportunity to actually engage in that way. and say their own private and personal goodbye. A couple of other points just before we close. I think it's always good, if you're speaking, to have a backup plan or a backup person. I've been to many of these occasions where the person who was down to speak became so overwhelmed with grief that they weren't able to speak. And the thing is, we don't want to lose that speech. We don't want to lose those thoughts that that person has written. And so it's a good thing to have someone else who can get up and read on behalf of that person. I think it's also important to introduce yourself. It sounds like a basic thing, but to get up and to introduce who you are and how you're connected to that deceased person. Share a story or a thought around that connection so people can understand, okay, this is how you fit in that person's life. I think it's also important to write it down. Write down what you're going to say. Good thing is that if you write it down, you've got something that you can refer to later. I had the opportunity, or I took the opportunity because none of my brothers and sister wanted to, but I delivered the eulogy at my father's funeral. And I've kept that. And I read it word for word. And often I'll just reflect on it and just read it, people commented that it was a well-written eulogy, and I'd actually given it to a few people to help, get some outside advice on it and some thought on it. But it's a wonderful piece, for me to be able to just reflect about my dad. Sure, I know what's there, and I know what I said, but in the emotion of the day, you will forget, everything you said. And to have it written down, to be able to look at it over the years later, it can be a great blessing to you. The last thing what I say, and I'm not going to go through this, but on the slide there, I've given you some thoughts there about preparing a eulogy. There's a lot of things that take place in a memorial service, and I think the eulogy is a very important piece there. And so we won't go into it, but you can have a look at it, maybe discuss it yourself. But I've just written down there a few thoughts on writing one, and what sort of things you should consider when you're writing that eulogy. And if you've got that opportunity, take it. Because it is a wonderful opportunity to describe the person's life and engage with those that are there. There's always going to be people in that audience that will come away saying, I didn't know that about that person. Wow, that was interesting. Wow, fancy that. He'd done that, or he'd been there, or she was connected to that person. And of course, the eulogy brings all that out. And so have a look at that, and maybe that'll be a help to you. So just a few thoughts on what is another platform, a different platform, speaking at a funeral service, a memorial service, maybe even it's at the graveside or at the wake. Maybe you've got the opportunity there to speak. And so take your time, prepare, allow yourself to be emotional, and take some of those thoughts into consideration. I hope they have helped you in this lesson.